I was recently preparing an executive presentation, and before the meeting, I was sitting down, getting ready. I opened up my laptop, and lo and behold, the screen froze. Okay, I started panicking, that sheer panic that comes across you, and because I was traveling at the time, I had put together my presentation, and I'd saved it to my desktop. It wasn't in the cloud, I had no way to access it, and the help desk wasn't there to help me. Have you guys experienced this before? Yes, I think we all have. And it's very frustrating, and it can be very terrifying, actually, in a business setting. Well, Google Chrome Enterprise is helping to solve problems like this for customers all over the world. Now, take a moment. Imagine that you are working for an organization. You have your Chromebook that's been given to you, and you're sitting there preparing for an executive presentation. And all of a sudden, something happens to the laptop, and you can't access your files. Well, what if that organization has a vending machine where you can walk down the hall to, you can simply grab a new Chromebook, open it up, go back to the room, log in, all your files, all your information, your data, it loads up right there for you, and you can actually execute on that presentation successfully. This is what one of Google's customers told us they were already doing, and it's driven a lot of value for that organization. My name is Sean McCormick. I'm a senior consultant at Forrester Research, and I'm here to tell you about the value that customers are achieving with implementing Google Chrome Enterprise within their organizations. So today we're going to talk about what TEI, or total economic impact, is. And then we'll talk about the challenges that these customers were facing before they implemented Google Chrome Enterprise. I'll tell you a little bit about what a composite organization is and how we utilize it to create our case studies. And then we'll actually walk through the results of 5 case studies that Google commissioned us to write. These case studies included cloud workers, Chrome OS with G Suite, Chrome browser, shared devices, and kiosks and digital signs. And we'll talk about how their customers are utilizing these technologies within their organizations to drive value and innovation. So let's start by talking about what TEI is. First, Forrester went out and we surveyed over 800 IT decision makers, and we wanted to know, was it valuable to have a business case when investing in a technology? Now, the results were staggering. Over 90% of those decision makers said yes. It was either very important or somewhat important to them to have a business case demonstrating the value of that technology while they were investing. So the next question naturally becomes, what is an effective business case? What makes up an effective methodology? You probably are familiar with TCO, or total cost of ownership. You may be familiar with ROI, or return on investment. But many of you may not be as familiar with TEI, or total economic impact. But what TEI is a methodology that we use at Forrester to develop business cases. And we use it because it takes what's good about the TCO and the ROI methodologies, and it adds additional components. We look at things like strategic impact. We look at risk and uncertainty, and we add those components in to the cost and the benefits for that business case. So the TEI methodology really represents 4 components. The benefits, which are your business benefits. These are revenue-driving benefits. These are benefits of increased productivity within your workforce. We'll look at the costs. These are costs to implement those technologies. These are the cost of supporting those technologies on an ongoing basis, right? But then we add a component in called flexibility, which we call strategic flexibility options. And these are the options that a company has once they've invested in a platform. They have the ability to further invest in additional capability and modules that might pair with that platform very easily and cost effectively. And those options themselves have value. From there, we apply something called a risk adjustment across all 3 of those variables. And this really is to account for the uncertainty and the assumptions that are made in any business case. And those risk adjustments create a more realistic and achievable business case for organizations. And that's what makes up the total economic impact methodology. So whenever we develop a case study, we start by doing our due diligence up front. We go out and we gather as much information on the technology, and we research that technology so that we have that baseline understanding of the technology itself. From there, we talked to subject matter experts, those that are both working at Google and those that are working at Forrester, to really get a deeper understanding of the value proposition and the benefits that organizations are achieving in investing in those technologies. Then we can create what's called a composite organization. And from that composite organization, we develop a financial model, we write up the case study, and that case study can then be published publicly for folks to go out, download, and read and see the results of what organizations are seeing from adopting these technologies. So this is the process that we took when we evaluated 5 of Google's technologies around Chrome Enterprise. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges that these organizations that we spoke with were facing before they adopted Google Chrome Enterprise. What we saw was that there was an ask of IT teams to really move into the cloud, to start adopting cloud technologies. And so we went out, we surveyed over 1,000 IT decision makers, and we asked them, what is your strategy for deploying new business applications? Over 81% said that they have a cloud-first strategy or prioritizing cloud to support the business needs. Now that's pretty staggering there, that these companies are being asked to go to the cloud first, to think about how they can implement these applications in the cloud first. So we asked them, to what extent are they prioritizing these following initiatives over the next 12 months? And over 60% responded and said that their use of cloud infrastructure and platforms and their use of cloud-based applications for employees were either a critical priority or a high priority. So there's obviously this trend in moving to the cloud and starting to adopt cloud technologies for organizations all over the world. But we wanted to know why. Why is there this trend? What is driving these organizations to move into the cloud? And so we asked them, within the next 12 months, to what extent is IT prioritizing the following initiatives? And number 1 was reduce costs. I think you all can relate to this within your organization. Reduce costs is being drilled into you day in and day out. But what's second on the list? Improving endpoint security? Now that's a very important thing, I think, in this day and age, and we hear it constantly around security issues, security incidents, data breaches, all of which are going on and can really turn an organization upside down. But I want to point your attention to what's number 4 and 5 on this list as well. Investing in technology that improves employee productivity, and investing in technologies that improve employee collaboration. And Google Chrome Enterprise is doing this for organizations. They're meeting the needs of organizations all over the world. They're meeting their top 12 priorities, and they're making this work within these companies. And I'll tell you how here in a minute. So one interview that we spoke with, who was an architect at a retail organization, said that they've struggled with maintaining their operating system. And when they weren't continuously optimizing, they get a lot of bloat and legacy technology, and that creating that technical debt is not sustainable at scale. I mean, who out there can relate to this within your organization? Who's spending time, wasting time, trying to manage these legacy technologies and keep them up and running and wasting resources and time rather than implementing new business initiatives? You're tying up resources. And so this is what their customers were saying to us. These are the challenges that they're facing. So one last question. What drives these organizations to move to Chrome devices? Why are they adopting Chrome devices? Number 1 on the list was improving usability and employee experience. Number 2, improving speed, improving IT productivity, and improving end user productivity. So as we talk about the results of these studies, keep this in mind, because this is what we've seen throughout the Google Chrome Enterprise and the reasons that organizations are adopting Chrome devices. So I'm going to pause for a moment. We're going to go into what a composite organization is, because we need to have a baseline understanding of what the size of these organizations are that are achieving the benefits in our studies. And so for all 5 studies, we utilize the same size of a composite organization. And a composite organization is essentially an amalgamation of the customers that we interviewed. And we went out and we interviewed 7 Google customers that were using Chrome Enterprise across multiple industries. Now these customers range in size from 1,400 employees to over 200,000 employees. They operated in different markets like healthcare, retail, manufacturing, even HR consulting and research. So a broad breadth of scope here around what these companies were doing and the size of these companies. But they're all benefiting from using Google Chrome Enterprise. So with our composite organization, which we designed, it was an organization that had 50,000 employees. They had $5 billion in annual revenue, and they deployed 7,000 Chrome OS devices within their workforce. They also implemented 450 Chrome kiosks and signs, and they put together 1,500 shared devices for their workers to use. Across their organization, they deployed Chrome browser as their default browser on every single endpoint, which was 75,000 endpoints. So this is the basis for our composite organization. This is the company that we're building these benefits based on. So let's get into the results of the study. First, we're going to talk about cloud workers and what it means to be a cloud worker and how they've achieved value in utilizing Google Chrome Enterprise. So in this first study, we focused on the value of the cloud worker itself. We focused on those cloud workers going from they were a knowledge worker before, to becoming a cloud worker, to cutting the cord, being mobile, having the ability to access the information they needed to work anytime and anywhere. Now, the return on investment that we saw for our composite organization was about 230% when adopting 7,000 devices across their organization. The net present value was about $13.3 million, and they received a payback within 6 months after they deployed. So how did we come up with those numbers? Well, we looked at 3 key benefit categories for the cloud worker study. The first was improved employee productivity. And the value here was really around less downtime for employees, right? So these 7,000 employees had issues like I spoke about at the beginning, where they were having to wait for updates to occur, or they were having computer malfunctions and had to work and troubleshoot with the help desk to figure out how they could access applications, and so on and so forth. And it was creating about 30 minutes of downtime for these employees on a weekly basis. When you add that up over 7,000 workers, that's about $3.1 million of savings over a 3-year period. Now, second here is IT management and service savings. Chrome devices require a lot less effort to deploy. Think about this. When you have a traditional laptop, your IT department needs to re-image that laptop, load up the applications for that laptop to your specific requirements and your needs, and then they can issue you that laptop. That takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of effort involved. With a Chromebook, you can just hand your worker the Chromebook. They log in. All of their settings are saved in the cloud, right? It all downloads right then and there. It's all in the cloud. So they have access to whatever applications they need already, and they have access to all of their information already. There's a lot of time savings for IT management from that perspective. Additionally, just managing and servicing those devices was a lot more cost-effective for these organizations. So in total, there was about $2.2 million of savings over a 3-year period. Hardware and software savings was the third, and quite honestly, the largest benefit that we saw. These Chrome devices were about 1/3 of the cost of the comparable solutions out there. So they're saving about $1,000 per device. 7,000 devices, that's a lot of money. Now, they're also saving on license costs as well. The license costs are about half as much as what they were previously paying. And so there's quite a bit of savings here over a 3-year period for the hardware and software. About $13.7 million in total. So we're going to move on and focus a little bit more on the software and the ability to use that software from these cloud workers. And we're going to talk a little bit more about G Suite and the productivity gains that organizations are seeing with G Suite. So for this study, the ROI was around 359%. The MPV about $15.2 million, and the payback again being less than 6 months after they deployed. So for this study, we actually found 6 benefit categories. The first 3 here on the screen, and similar to the cloud worker study, we saw decreased user downtime of about 30 minutes per week. Additionally, there was help desk time savings with reduced tickets and maintaining those devices. And so there was about 15.5% efficiencies seen there. This other category, though, security cost avoidance, was something that we saw come up when we looked at the challenges that these organizations were facing up front. And overall, we saw about a 20% reduction in the amount of risk of endpoint security incidents within these organizations we spoke with. So what makes up that $1.6 million? Well, we asked these companies, which of the following IT and security efficiencies has your organization achieved due to your investment in Google? And it was clear: faster remediation of IT issues, better reporting and improved visibility, reduction in the risk and cost of a data breach, just the reduced number of data breaches. Those are some of the reasons that are driving value within these organizations around security. So furthermore, there was 3 other benefits that we identified. Improved user productivity, which was about 10 minutes per day. Think of it this way. This category encapsulates really all the productivity and collaboration improvements that you might get from utilizing G Suite. But what one customer told us was that it was as simple as quick replies in their emails. As simple as something like that, where now that they have the ability to open up the email on their mobile device, and it gives them 3 options of how to reply to an email, they're saving time. They're saving time every day versus having to, okay, open up the email, let me write, okay, on my phone, and it takes me a little bit because I have one finger and it takes me longer, and okay, now I'm done, send. That's a lot more time than just clicking a button and pressing send, right? So even that, even as simple as that, is saving time within these organizations. So the improved user productivity of only 10 minutes a day across these 7,000 cloud workers was about $3.9 million of savings. Increased mobility savings is our next category here. And this was around 22 minutes a day on average. Now, what is mobility and what does that mean to an organization? Well, one customer said, I can now work from the beach. They can work from the beach. I said, sign me up. I want to work from the beach. But, you know, joking aside, they're actually seeing a lot of savings here. And another customer told us that they were commuting on their way home. Their CIO sent them an email saying, I need a critical report and I need it right now. Now, their previous environment wouldn't allow them to do this, to access their files remotely, send them along through email. It was very difficult. But with G Suite, they were able to do that. They could go and access Google Drive right from their mobile device. They could send it in an email and get that critical report to their CIO within seconds. Okay, that's just one example, but there's many examples of mobilities. Organizations are adopting more virtual meeting formats rather than in-person meetings. They're saving on corporate travel. Many other examples of how they're saving time and money here from a mobility perspective. And in total, it was about $8 million for our composite organization. Last benefit, similar to the cloud worker study, was a license savings here of about $100 per user. And that added up to about $1.7 million in total. So just a couple quotes here, because this first one I think does a really nice job of just discussing what it means to be a cloud worker. And so I'm going to read it real quick. But mobility isn't us putting all of the apps and the data on my device. It's all these cloud applications and the experiences being decoupled from my devices, allowing me to be mobile across all of my different devices. That's pretty powerful. Think of that. It's not just them putting the apps and the data on their phone or whatever device they have so they can do their work when they're mobile, but it's actually them being able to do their work wherever they need to do their work, irregardless of the device that they're using. That's what it means to be truly mobile. And for this organization, Google helped them to achieve that. A quote here around the IT management savings from an organization. And they said, thinking back, the amount of time we used to spend to build the packets, deploy them, and fix the things that were broken, they just don't have to do that anymore. They get to save all that time and get to focus on value-added work rather than fixing things. Okay, so there's a lot of time savings here, and these are real savings for organizations that are adopting Chrome Enterprise. I'm going to pause for a second And we have a microphone here in the middle here, but I want to open it up to some questions around the cloud workers and the Chrome OS with G Suite studies that we authored. And just see, do you guys have any questions? And if so, feel free to come up to the microphone. And if not, that's okay. We'll keep going. So the next study we focused on was on Chrome browser. And for our composite organization, if you remember, they deployed Chrome browser as their default browser across all 75,000 endpoints within their organization. But let's talk about the journey that they were on. What were they facing ahead of time? They were facing an environment where they had multiple browsers. They had an inconsistent experience for their end users. And for their IT team, it meant more time and energy focusing on managing these multiple instances of browsers. So when they were going out and looking for a solution, they really wanted to reduce the burden on their IT teams. They wanted to provide a centralized ability to control policies and make custom rules. And they were able to do so with Chrome Enterprise. So the Chrome browser itself increases the IT admin and developer time savings. It reduces the remediation time and the reduced risk of security attacks, and it improves the end user productivity. So let's talk about how that happens. But first, in this study, we saw an ROI of 1,344%. Can anybody tell me why that ROI is so high? Any guesses? It's because there's a very low investment here. Chrome browser doesn't require a license cost, right? And so when you think about the ROI calculation, obviously your return is high, but your investment, which is in your denominator, is very low. And so that drives this ROI up to over 1,000%. Maybe the better metric to measure value here is the NPV of $6.9 million. And that's what we'll talk about how we got there. So in this study, there were 3 categories of benefits that were quantified. The first was improved end user productivity. Now think of this. These organizations are now seeing better performance within their applications through Google Chrome browser than their previous browser solution. The performance is better, and their employees don't have to go to multiple browsers to figure out which one's working for them and which one's not within these applications. So there's a lot of time savings wrapped up into that, and for our composite organization, that resulted in about $5.8 million of savings. IT resource savings is the second benefit category here. And this is just the time to be able to manage that Chrome browser centrally. So they're not only saving time from not having to manage multiple browsers within their organization, but they're able to save time in writing policies and developing custom rules from a centrally commanded console. The last is improved remediation time. And for this one, we wanted to understand, what is driving the security benefits within these organizations. How are they seeing improved remediation time, which led to about $581,000 of savings. So one customer told us, and they said that they've seen a dramatic reduction in the malware and phishing attacks after deploying Chrome as their default browser in their company, and that their security teams now have freed up bandwidth to focus on more value-added and proactive initiatives to keep their organization's data safer. This is very powerful because this is changing the way that their security teams are working. They're no longer having to be reactive and reacting to the incidents that are going on, but they can start being proactive and changing the paradigm for them to prevent future incidents from occurring. And so this was a very powerful thing for them when they adopted the Chrome browser as their default browser across their enterprise. Another quote here from a customer. We've decided to build all of our applications so that they are compatible with Chrome. Now that our entire organization is on the same version of the browser, our employees don't have to worry if their everyday applications will work with the browser anymore. How many times have you guys in your work, in your day-to-day, had to worry about, oh, why is this application not working? I can't get it to open up. It's giving me an error. Maybe I'm not VPN'd in. Maybe I'm not on the right browser. It's constantly happening, right? Like I'm sure you've all experienced this. For this organization, they're saving a ton of time and creating a lot less confusion and frustration for their employees in doing this. and adopting Chrome browser. Let's move on to the shared devices study. So in this study, we wanted to know what was driving organizations to adopt Chrome devices, specifically those that were adopting the shared devices. So we went out and we surveyed 63 companies that were using Google Chrome shared devices. And within those companies, the number one reason why they adopted those shared devices was to improve end-user productivity. Second was to improve usability and the employee experience. And third was to improve IT productivity. So I think there's a lot of consistency amongst the reasons that organizations are not only adopting Chrome devices, but also adopting shared devices. And maybe just to clarify what a shared device is, it's a Chromebook, it's a Chrome box, it's some sort of device that multiple users are using, right? So think of it maybe in your training rooms, right? In your training rooms, you have now switched out your legacy technology for all Chromebooks. Okay, and you have multiple people coming through and utilizing those same devices all day long. Okay, well then they can easily log in and they have access to all of their information on that device. So that's what a shared device is. So in this study, we found a return on investment of about 438%, a net present value of $4.2 million, and a payback period of less than 6 months. Now, how did we get there? Well, let's talk about these benefits a little bit more. The improved end-user productivity. Now, this is what was seen as kind of the number one reason in adopting shared devices. And I think we saw it throughout a lot of our conversations with companies was around how much productivity they were saving just from having these shared devices. So they were no longer having to try to figure out, how do I get my applications on this device and how do, this doesn't work for me, and they were no longer having to work with training tools that were, out of date with the applications or in training mode and things of that sort. So quite a bit of savings from that perspective. The second category is hardware and software cost avoidance. Now, we've seen this throughout, but Chrome devices are a lot less expensive than their comparable alternatives out there. And so for many of the organizations that we talked to, they saw savings. In our composite, it equaled to $1.6 million over that 3-year period that we looked at. The IT management and service cost avoidance of about $477,000 came from the fact that these devices are much easier to manage, much easier to update because it's all centralized in the cloud, so they were always updated. A little story. One of the customers we talked to said that that when they had their training room set up, they actually spent an entire day every 3 months going through and updating each one of those laptops within their training room. I mean, they're spending 8 hours of their time updating these laptops so that they're up to date with the latest security patches and so on and so forth. With a Chromebook, it does that automatically. They didn't have to do that anymore. And so there's quite a bit of IT management savings from that perspective. The last study that we looked at was kiosks and digital signage and how organizations were deploying these kiosks and digital signs within their organization. And if you think back to our composite, they ended up deploying 450 kiosks and digital signs. So with this, we asked, which of the following benefits has your organization achieved due to the investment in Chrome signage and kiosks? First one here was lower professional service costs. They didn't have to hire companies to actually manage their services and the signboards and the kiosks within all these locations. Cheaper hardware costs, increased sales and revenue improvements, increasing the number of kiosks and digital signage used. They were able to take the savings that they saw and purchase more kiosks and signs, roll them out company-wide. So just a couple quotes of how these organizations are using kiosks and digital signs. One came from a systems engineer at a retail company that said, "We're using Chrome devices in kiosk mode for our digital signboards. With Chrome Sign Builder, we have the flexibility to have our regional teams roll out content quickly, and we can connect wirelessly to our corporate network to allow the mobility of our digital signs to different locations as needed." Okay, that was a mouthful there, but what they're really saying is that they now have centralized control of what's being displayed on those signboards. And they can quickly and easily connect them all through the cloud and push out the content that they need on those signboards. The second quote comes from a healthcare company, from the desktop architect. And they said, this was more around the kiosks, but they said, our doctors and nurses do not need to unnecessarily carry large hardware devices from room to room. They can now just log in with their credentials on our Google Chrome kiosks and quickly access and enter in patient data. So think about this. If you're a nurse or a doctor and you're going from room to room all day, and you have this device that you're carrying with you, might be a laptop, maybe it's a tablet, whatever it is, and then you go and take your lunch break, and you leave it at the lunch table. Somebody takes it and steals it. That's a huge security risk. Okay? With these kiosks, they're now, in the room, they're stationary, and they just go in and log in. And they don't have to carry it around with them. They don't have to be concerned with leaving it somewhere and trying to track it down, find out what happened to it. It's all stationary, and everything that they need will be available to them once they log in. So that's quite a bit of savings there. So for this study, we found that our composite organization saved about $4.6 million over the 3-year period. They had 472% return on investment, and the payback here was less than 6 months. There was 4 benefit categories that we quantified for this study, the first being increased revenue. So how's an organization increasing revenue with digital signs and kiosks? Well, we'll go back to our retail company that we talked to for an example. Now, they said that their customers are now expecting the same variety, the same sizes, and the same shapes of products, for that matter, of what they would get online in the store. It's an expectation now. And when those customers go into the store and start shopping, and they don't see that product that they want, and they don't have the ability to get it right then and there, they're going to walk out frustrated, and they're going to go to your nearest competitor, and they're going to buy that product there. But with the kiosks that these retail companies introduced, they were able to put those right on the sales floor, allow their customers to go and search on the kiosk, find the products that they needed, have them buy them right there, and have them shipped to their house. Okay? So that saved quite a bit of revenue. About 3% is what we found with the organizations that we talked to. And that led to about $3.3 million in net income over the 3-year period. Now, the second category is IT resource savings. I think we've seen this throughout, but that these devices are a lot more cost-effective to manage than their comparable solution. In fact, 80% task time was reduced, is what the customers told us, in managing these devices. And so that led to about $1 million in savings over the 3-year period. Third here is increased employee productivity of about 3 hours per week. Okay? There's quite a bit of savings just from being able to centralize the content of these signs. And so in that manner, organizations were seeing savings of about 3 hours per week. $755,000 over 3 years of savings. Last is IT hardware and software cost avoidance. Now in this, there's about 50% less cost than the most comparable solution out there for these organizations. And so I think we see this hardware savings throughout all of the studies, but it's something that's real, and it's something that these organizations are finding when they adopt Google Chrome Enterprise. So I want to pause here and recap what we've talked about thus far. We looked at the cloud worker, and we found out that they see savings in improved employee experience, and they see savings in the devices themselves. We looked at Chrome OS with G Suite and focused a little bit more on the software aspect of G Suite. And we found out that cloud workers are more mobile. They can work whenever they need to work, regardless of the device. And they're more productive in that manner. The third study was Chrome browser. What we found with Chrome browser is that there's obviously a security gain in going to a single default browser within the organization. But they also saw productivity improvements with the employees, with being able to, with their applications performing better, with not having to worry about which browser to open up for which application, calling the help desk, opening up a ticket, so on and so forth. Shared devices and kiosks and digital signs. There was a lot of device savings here, but there was also some productivity gains, some ease and usability, and some IT management savings. So I want to thank you guys for sitting here today and listening to the value that Google's customers are achieving by utilizing Google Chrome Enterprise.